So today we have Janay Kingsberry. I'm so excited because Janay and I actually worked together a few years ago at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and she worked in the audience department there. I feel since then you've done so many versatile things with being able to be a digital journalist, digital journalist, and have put those skill sets to use across newsrooms all over the country. So this is great. And so Janay right now is an editor at The Lily, which hopefully you got a chance to sign up for. We just discussed newsletters, but I think The Lily has quite frankly expanded past newsletters. So I want you to enjoy this lecture, ask her questions, and be open and free. It's all yours, Janay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, such a nice intro. I really have been all over the place now, but it's really nice to be settled in DC and just staying here for a minute. Let me share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant share screening. Maybe you might need to enable me, Nikki, on your side if you can.
Let me see if I can. Hold on one sec. So let me share. Oh, I updated my computer yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's see. Second. Let me try this one more time. So does it let you share now?
Oh yeah, let me try it. Let's see. No, still doesn't work. But oh, you also have my presentation, so
I do. Okay.
You can also just be my clicker if
Oh, let me try. Hold on 1 second. Okay, try one more time.
Oh, there we go. That was it.
Okay.
Alrighty. So let me make sure I share the right screen now. There's always like options that pop up. Okay, here we go. I think you should see me or my presentation.
We see your presentation perfectly.
And I have Zoom opened up on another window, which is why I keep turning. But great, yeah, this is me on a good day. Hang on. So yeah, as Nikki said, I'm a multimedia journalist. And what I thought I'd do is just kind of walk you through how I got where I am now. Hang on, let's see if my clicker works. There we go. So how I got here, as Nikki said, I'm at the Washington Post, but just to give you some background about who I am, I'm an Aries, if anyone's interested in that sort of info. I'm also an Army brat. I was born in Germany. My mom was in the military, so we moved around a lot. And I think, honestly, that's kind of what got me interested in writing and photography, and doing all sorts of little things as an act of remembrance. It was just sort of my way of like documenting my life at different changes and different stages of it. So it wasn't until I got into high school though that I kind of realized I could make a career out of just, writing, out of like all of my interest in sort of documenting things through photo and video. And so when I went off to college, that was in 2005, I went to Savannah State University. And number one, I went there because I wanted to be like not too close or too far from my mom who lives in Augusta, but also something people don't know about Savannah State is it's one of the only like HBCUs in Georgia with an accredited mass communications journalism program. I think actually out of the state, there's only like 2 or 3, including UGA and University of West Georgia. So I went to school there, but at the time I was studying print journalism because that's how old I am. Facebook and Twitter weren't around yet. I actually kind of like, me and my friends kind of call ourselves like the first generation of Facebook users because it literally like started, I think maybe within our first semester is when I got a Facebook. So I still remember like all the ugly designs and interfaces before they got to where they are now. But yeah, so at the time, my school and a lot of schools weren't focused on, a digital media sort of program or anything. No one was ready, right? And we still see that now. A lot of newspapers are still trying to figure out their business model within this digital landscape. So that's kind of where I was at the time, but I was lucky enough to get my first job while I was still in college. And so that sort of real newsroom experience, I think, helped me at a time when I might have kind of gone in, like finished school and been completely like, oblivious to what was happening and how newsrooms were trying to adjust to this. Anyway, while I was in college, I met this guy here. That's Michael, my husband. He's kind of the reason why I've been all over the country now, because he's in the military. He's in the Marine Corps, and so that career has sent him from Yuma, Arizona to California to now DC. And in between all of that, he did a few deployments in Afghanistan. But now we're here, so we moved to DC because he got a job at the Pentagon. He's going to get out next year, and we're finally just like, settling our roots. It looks like someone's trying to enter the room. I don't know if you see this, Nikki. Reed Hurd, is that a student?
It is, but can you admit him? I think you're the host now.
I think, because you gave me host privileges, that's why I got it. Not to put your students on blast, but running late. But so where was I? So now we're in DC, we're settled here. I actually started going back to school online, which was funny because I started that in 2019 before the pandemic hit, and I felt kind of weird. Like, I don't know, there was always this shame and like stigma around like, oh, you're going to an online school. But I went to Arizona State's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, which is a great program. And the fact that they offered an online program, I thought was just so convenient, especially since I was still full-time working, but I knew I wanted to like keep delving into this topic and really, I don't know, just go back to the basics. I love being in school, to be honest. So I went to, I got, a digital audiences degree from the Arizona State Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. And I finished last December. And then this year, I hope this isn't, I got all these little buttons blocking my view, but hopefully it doesn't block your view.
We can
Anyway,
see it
this year,
perfectly.
oh, okay, cool. I think it's just all my little like share, pause, random buttons on here. But in March, I joined, and that was after 2 years working at Politico. So I'll go into a little more detail about like my actual career track. Let's see, there we go. So as I stated, when I was still in school in Georgia, I got my first newsroom job. This was at Savannah Morning News. And honestly, at the time when I was still in school, like I said, I wanted to study print journalism. I was like, I just want to be a writer. I want to see my name in newspapers, like all of that. That was my big, like whatever, overarching dream. But working in my first newsroom, the first thing they did was like throw a camera in my hands and like, hey, there was an accident. We need you to go shoot. Like I was already doing, this is not what I studied at all. So, I mean, I was doing everything from like building databases to like covering crime scenes. I had to go cover a bank robbery one time. I was working in a small newsroom, so like everybody there was wearing a lot of hats. So we sometimes just had to like step up and do something. But I feel so thankful now looking back at all of that, because it gave me such a well-rounded like start in journalism, and that I feel like I could pick up something easily. And even at the time, if it felt like a learning curve, I feel like now I've learned to just adapt and embrace like opportunities to kind of step out of my box. So yeah, I was a web producer, but I was doing so much more. And that's what really got me interested in photography. And I started doing a lot of that throughout my career too. And then, so after 5 years there, I joined the AJC, where I became an all topics producer. So it was a similar job, but a much bigger newsroom. So there wasn't as much like touching into other areas. Like I didn't have to do any like photography or stuff, but I mean, it was such a great newsroom that, they really supported other things that I wanted to do. So I did get those opportunities, but again, mostly I was a web producer here. This is where I met Nikki. Even Nikki tried to get me to write a few times, I think, for the feature section. And then I also later became a social media producer for like the premium website that we had at the time. And then I left AJC because that's when Michael and I decided to stop the whole long distance thing. And so I moved out to California and we got married. And then I started working for the Mercury News and East Bay Times in California. This is up in the Bay Area, near like Silicon Valley. And this was the first time I actually had like a management role, because there was no social team that existed. I had returned back to like a smaller newsroom setting, local newsroom setting, and they had no social strategy. So this for me was like putting everything to use that I had learned from the AJC and Savannah Morning News. It was kind of time for me to take all of that expertise and experience and come up with a full-fledged like newsroom-wide strategy for how we leverage our content on social and how we engage with readers. So I led that effort, and I had a team of producers who would handle like posting to social on weekends, on weekdays, and just really handling a lot of our biggest like enterprise efforts. Anyway, after Michael's time in California, we knew we always wanted to go back to the East Coast. So when he got a job at the Pentagon, it was perfect. It was like, okay, we're pretty close to Georgia now, but we'll be in DC. So we got there, and I spent like 2 or 3 months looking for a job. This is like 2019 now. And then I finally got a role at Politico. And I couldn't have picked a crazier time to work in politics or to work in political journalism, because I think literally within the first month, September 2019, was when Nancy Pelosi filed an impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump. And that was just impeachment number 1. So my first day there it was already like, baptism by fire. It was like all hands on deck type of day. And then from there, we had the elections, we had presidential debates, and that sent me back to California. I got to help cover our debate in December. And then elections, impeachment, acquittal, and then coronavirus, more election stuff. I mean, it just got crazier and crazier. When I left in March, it was after the second impeachment, and it was also after insurrection. So I definitely felt a lot of burnout during that time. But my job there was as an engagement editor. And basically, I worked with a lot of reporters, once again, to kind of just help them leverage their stories on social. I would say that I'm very grateful for that experience. It taught me that I did not really want to be in political journalism, but I did realize how important it is to just kind of have an idea of what's happening on the Hill and what's happening in the White House. So I picked up so much knowledge there. And I really, I think it allowed me to understand the ways we need to break down these big stories on social. So just really looking at how laws are passed and how hearings can go on and we don't know what's happening in them, that I took all of my own confusion and just even ignorance in what was happening, and figured like, how can I apply that to other readers who don't know what's going on or feel like it's just too convoluted. So I did a lot of work there to kind of break down these big stories and make it easier for viewers to digest. And anyway, finally, when I left in March, that was to join the Lily as a multi-platform editor. So the Lily is a publication covering women and gender for the Washington Post. So we are in the building with them. We are a Washington Post publication. Right now we have our own domain, thelily.com, but we will be moving over to the Washington Post next year. I think Q2 is still the hope. So pretty soon we'll be on WashingtonPost.com's domain. And we'll also be behind the paywall and everything else you come to expect from the Washington Post site. But the Lily was started as a way to, thank you. Sorry, I had a quick coffee. The Lily was started as a way to sort of get younger readers onto like aware of what the Washington Post brand is. So we target millennial women and Gen Z women, and you'll get to see a little bit of how we do that in just a moment. This is the Lily. And the number one way that we get involved is through Instagram. This is like our top social platform where we engage with readers. A lot of our content is very colorful, very visual. We like bold photos and big headlines. And some of our goals on this platform, number one, we always want to be engaging and likable. So we try to surface stories that really evoke an emotion, but also remain respectful to the moment. We're also making sure that our posts are very clear and concise. We want you to look instantly at an Instagram post and know what we're talking about and what's happening. So we don't ever want to like overload people with information. We keep it really simple. We want our content to be shareable, hence the big graphics, the colors we use, the photos we use, all of that ties into how engaging stories perform. And you kind of see that across Instagram anyway, is that I think the algorithm itself is even pushing more content up that has these sort of interactive elements, creative elements, multimedia elements. Reels are a big thing right now, IGTV, all of that. And we've heard from our Instagram reps that using Reels is the #1 way to gain more followers. So they want you using their tools, and they're telling you this is what you need to do if you want to get in front of more people. So we're constantly experimenting with all the different features that Instagram offers. But like I would say our #1 metric is shares on Instagram, which is something you can't always see, or at least the front-facing user can't see it. But shares just really means how many times are people like taking our post and sending it to a friend, DMing it to a friend. Those are really impactful, as well as comments. We're looking at who's liking, who's commenting and tagging their friends. We want to drive and grow as much reach as we can, and shares and comments seem to be those metrics are the ones that matter the most. And then lastly, which kind of ties into the first one, is that we want our content to be timely. So again, respectful to the moment and also relevant to the moment. So we pay very close attention, not just to the news, but also how the narrative shifts around the news. So I would say like a good example was probably Gabby Petito last week. She's the Instagram influencer who went missing and was later found to be killed, or her body was found. So we didn't instantly get a story up on that, and I'm glad we actually kind of took our time getting that post up, because as that story developed, we saw the news begin to shift and the narrative begin to shift around that situation, where it became like, what about other women of color, people of color that are missing? Why don't they get that same attention? So the story we ended up writing was more so focused on like what Gabby Petito's, what her story, what her case means, and the message it sends to other women and other victims during this time. So we're always kind of paying very close attention to like sensitivity around those sort of topics, and just making sure that the posts that we get, that we put up, speak to a more broader audience than just, the women who identify as Gabby or see themselves in Gabby. So yeah, that's Instagram. Please stop me at any time if you have questions. But I know we're supposed to hold them off to the end, but I also want to make sure I don't talk all day.
Oh, I don't. It's when if they need to ask a question and you're willing, then I
Okay,
will
cool.
not stop.
All right. Great. Quick other thing we do on Instagram is we get very personable. So there's me and two of my colleagues, Anne and Hannah. Every Monday we do this thing where like a rotating member will hop on Instagram stories and we'll just like talk about things that we like. This is just kind of our way to connect with readers on a more personal level. Lily, or Team Lily, as we like to call ourselves, is a foremost, we want it to be a platform that feels like, you're talking to your best friend or your sister. A lot of the ways in which we approach stories and how we engage on social, we want it to come across as if your friend had sent it to you. So we do that too by just kind of revealing a little bit of ourselves every Monday. One of us hops on and just shares 3 things that makes us happy, that's getting us through the week, or that we've recently discovered. It's literally anything from like books and songs and shows we're watching. It's just kind of fun. And again, it like helps us connect and puts a face behind the brand for the Lily. And then lastly, our bread and butter is the newsletter. So we have a newsletter called the Lily Lines, and we send out 2 newsletters a week. We have one that goes out on Monday and one that goes out on Thursday. So one just went out today. The Monday newsletter is our really, really beautiful package. It's always original illustrations. We always have a really like specific story that we've picked and that we've written specifically for the newsletter that leads the story. So the graphic is kind of cut off here, but this past Monday we did a newsletter around banned books week. So we talked to authors, female authors who have had their books banned, and we put together this really gorgeous package. And again, original illustrations. All of our illustrations, they typically come from freelancers. So if you're an artist, a comic artist, a digital artist, we're always interested in finding new talent and showcasing their work and, letting their work illustrate our stories. And so that's what our Monday newsletter is. It also includes like a good news section. So we like to flag one good story everyone should read. And then it's also where we add our 3 recs. So the slide I showed you previously of all of us kind of sharing the things we like, we include this at the bottom of the email. It's kind of like our sign off. And then 3, in case you missed it, stories from the Washington Post. So we're always constantly plugging the Washington Post because it is still, our company, and we want to make sure that we're bringing people to both sites. And then for our Thursday newsletter, this one's a lot simpler. It's just a list of stories throughout the week that we curate. So these are Lily stories that we just kind of quickly build. This one's the easier one, a much lower lift newsletter. But it goes out every Thursday. Both of these newsletters go out at 7 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays. I built the newsletter that ran today, and I do that on Wednesdays. It just literally just takes 2 hours maybe to compile all the stories, and then work up a subject line, have it edited by a copy editor, and then we schedule it to send. So it's a pretty fun process, actually, especially the Monday one, because everyone gets involved in that. So it's not just one person building the Monday newsletter. We all kind of build it together because everyone's adding different elements. We have designers coming in, we have illustrators dropping in their stuff, and then the writers are dropping in their text. So it's a team effort, which is always fun. Everything we do at the Lily is actually a team effort, from the posts that we put on social to the headlines and subject lines that we write. We ask the whole team what their opinions are and get them to weigh in, which I think is fun because I hate being just like the only person to kind of come up with a headline or a subject line. So I get a lot of great constructive feedback and input from the rest of the team during these meetings. Just quickly, some of our goals though with this newsletter. Number 1 is that we want to share very smart journalism and beautiful stories that impact everyday women. And a lot of times it's us looking at what's happening in the news and then figuring out what's the Lily angle to that story. So we're still covering a lot of the same topics that the Washington Post is covering, but we're doing it from a women's perspective. So lately, though, there's been just an influx of news with things happening in Texas, the abortion ban. We have the Women's March on Saturday, which is going to be huge here in DC. So we've got a whole plan around that. Even when I first started in March, I think I actually have a knack for just like starting on really busy days, because when I got there, it was also when we had the shooting in Atlanta, and we know, Asian American women were killed in that. And so literally, once again, right out the gate, it was a busy week for me starting at a new job. But that's what we do, is we find these big stories and we figure out how to tell it from a women's angle. We also, we want the newsletter to be engaging and to have this visual aesthetic, this identity that people will recognize instantly. So the colors we use are very consistent. We only use like a certain shade of pink and blue. What are our other colors? Yellow is in there sometimes, but we have a whole color palette that we use pretty often, and the fonts and everything. We want the whole experience to feel reliable and digestible, and for people to kind of understand what to expect each time. So it becomes, a ritual and a practice of like, the Lily arrives every Thursday. Let me check and see what it says. And you kind of know what it's going to, you may not know what the content is, but you know what the experience is going to be. And then again, of course, we also just want to make sure we're driving traffic to thelily.com. And we do get a lot of traffic through our newsletters. So yeah, we keep really close tabs on the subject lines at work, on the open rates, on the lead stories that connect with our readers. And we're constantly kind of reevaluating this process so that we're this newsletter is as effective as it can be. Let's see. So this is really long, but I'm just going to skim through this. I wanted to give you guys an idea of what like my typical day looks like. This is some of our team members in the corner here, but I would say my day actually starts before I even log on at 9. I like to just make sure I wake up and digest some of my favorite newsletters. So because I'm in DC, I read a lot of local newsletters like the DCist, 730 DC. I'm really into what Axios is doing with local newsletters. So I read Axios DC. I also read Axios Atlanta, or when it drops, I will be reading Axios Atlanta, just because my mom still lives there and I go to Atlanta a lot.
I signed up for that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Politico Playbook, because I still want to know a little bit of politics. And then I get ready, and then I also listen to daily podcasts too. So I really like Up First by NPR and the Daily. But after that, when I log on to Slack at 9, we all greet each other. We usually do something called a prompt. This is something that was born out of the pandemic to make sure we all stay connected. And basically, everyone or a rotating team member will ask a question to the group and say, it could be anything. Like, what was a recent one? Today was like, what is your favorite like national park or favorite national or natural, landmark that you visited, like the Grand Canyon or Yosemite. And then we have some, like we had a Halloween one, which was like, what's your favorite Halloween costume that you've worn? Some of them get really a little more personal, like what's something you're insecure about. We just do a prompt every day in the morning, but it's been one way to keep our whole team connected, and we just answer each other on Slack, and it's really nice. But for me, what my typical day looks like is I'm running around through different social channels and Slack channels to figure out what to prioritize that day. On this particular day, when I was taking notes, we had a lot happening. Britney Spears' father had filed to end to end his conservatorship of her. I hope that's the right way to say that. And then a South Dakota governor had issued an order restricting abortion medication, and then also Elizabeth Holmes' trial was starting, so it was a huge week. And then around 10:30, I meet with my direct team, which is a colleague of mine who's also a multi-platform editor, as well as our manager, and we brainstorm some rollout strategies for a big Lilly investigation that was publishing later. And then the rest of the day, I kind of spend like at 11 is when I just start working on social posts for the day. We don't post as often on really any of our platforms. Instagram gets our most attention, but on Facebook and Twitter, we do still have a presence there, and we post like every few hours. So that's why I can kind of get a late start compared to like the Washington Post, where they're like posting stories around the clock. But we spend some time really strategizing. Since we only do few posts, we want to make sure that they're the best posts and that, we've optimized them to really connect with our readers. I took a late lunch around 1 that day. And then at 2 is when we started working on the newsletter. So again, this was Wednesday. We were prepping the Thursday newsletter. And again, that involves us all brainstorming a subject line and then sending off the newsletter to be copy edited. Okay, I think someone else is trying to admit the room. Jonathan, hang on 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then after that, I spend the rest of the day really working on my own stories that I have to write. Right now, I'm working on a story about pay transparency, which is due tomorrow or Saturday. So
Send that to me.
I know, I'm like, I need to get writing, but it's coming together nicely. And then at 5 is when most of us sign off, and I try to unplug as best as I can and not check my phone too often. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So about the test emails. So do you send the emails out to your readers, or is it to like a special group of people that like test it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We send it just within the group. So we have like a team email account that I like, we'll just type that one team email, and it'll go out to like all 9 of us. So no one else sees it, but it is quite scary being in there when you're trying to like send a test, because we definitely don't want it to go out too soon, especially when a lot of areas are still blank or not full. But the platform that we use is really cool. It's called Carta. And actually, I think the Washington Post made it or designed it. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't want to give out any misinformation, but essentially when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, I don't know when that was now. Was it 2005, 2009? Somewhere, it was a while, it was years ago. But when he bought the Post, he definitely had this huge vision to make the Washington Post not just a publishing company, but an actual technology company. And so a whole team came in that basically, like a product team that basically designed all of our tools for us, from our CMS, our content management system, to the newsletter tools that we use. These are all like house-made like programs, and they're constantly being updated, reevaluated. They often ask for reporters' feedback on what we need to make it run smoothly, to feel more comfortable using the tools. And so, so yeah, the newsletter tool that we use has a lot of safeguards in place, which is great, so that we make sure we don't send the newsletter out, too early or accidentally before we mean to. Anyway, that was my long-winded way of saying that, yeah, a lot of our platforms are constantly evolving. But our newsletter tool, I think, is one of the best I've worked with. And I've worked with a lot of newsletter platforms now at this point. The other great thing, though, too, is that we're able to give these tools, let other publishers use it. So I think LA Times is like one of our clients, like they actually use our CMS. And so, yeah, that's part of what made us a software company, is that we're not just making these tools for ourselves, but other journalists can use them as well.
So does the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We bought your CMS.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
cool.
as far when I left anyway.
That's good to hear, because I remember I did not like the previous one, Methode, I think.
Yeah. Oh, we had another one after that. Yeah.
Oh,
So
gosh.
we finally went to yours.
Oh, well, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. So what is a digital journalist? I wanted to back up a little bit, because I know a lot of what I said still kind of doesn't make it clear, like, what do I do every day? It's a little bit of everything, right? So for me, I like to think of a digital journalist as someone who works in any really area to help distribute, produce, and leverage content across the internet. And also to grow our reach and engage our readers across different platforms. To me, I think a lot of the skills required for this role involve, number one, just coming in with like this excitement and creativity each day to try something new, to experiment. And like I was saying earlier, that got a little hard for me, particularly during the pandemic when I was at Politico, like of just feeling burnt out, which is why it's been very important to me to really unplug as much as I can and step away from the computer, because you are constantly on all the time, and there's so many feeds you have to check. So you don't want to lose that excitement, and you don't ever, especially if it's something that you're passionate about. If you love working in social media or an audience and digital media, you want to hold on to that spark. So that comes with just taking care of yourself, I think. There's also a sense of urgency. I think even more of an urgency with digital rather than print, because now it's like, who's the first to tweet out this big breaking news or get the mobile alert push on your phone, because you'll get 10 of them, but you only need one of them if they're all related to the same news. But at the same time, you still want to maintain accuracy and integrity when you're doing this. So you're balancing a lot of hats for sure. And then it requires a lot of proficiency with design and editing programs. And to be honest, that's something I did not have starting out. So, it's also quite reasonable to just be fair with yourself, to come in knowing that, like, okay, I don't know how to use Adobe or whatever, but just having, again, the eagerness to pick up new skills, I think you'll be just fine. I learned so much along the way that I just feel grateful people took a chance on me, because I had no idea what I was doing like my first few years in journalism. And I really just picked up so much just from everyone else's patience and, their willingness to work with me. Comfort and ease with using social media. A lot of people just don't want to be on social. And I think that's something you should really ask yourself, is like, do you like tweeting? or are you interested in following tweets and following people all day on social? Because that's a big part of the job, is listening and just staying connected and staying up to date too on all these platforms. I actually find that I feel like I'm phasing out of this area where, like, I rarely tweet now. I don't really use Facebook. I still absolutely love Instagram, which works for my team because, like I said, we are more so focused on Instagram. That's where we have our largest audience. And I still love that platform because I feel like I'm a very visual person and I like photos and art, and I find so much more inspiration there. So, but I'm like slowly phasing out of it too, where I'm like, I don't know how many times I can keep scrolling through feeds. And so the good thing though is that digital journalism doesn't have to mean social media. It could just mean like you are a beat reporter or you write online. So I'm getting to a place where like I'm moving more into writing rather than just doing social media. One thing though I think I'll always love, which is the next tip on here, is just like the ability to train others, team members, other reporters. I absolutely love doing this. I did this pretty much in every newsroom I've worked in, was lead some sort of digital training initiative to help other reporters get to a place where they feel more comfortable engaging on social, but also just to, in general, build their own digital instincts. That's so important to have, I think. And it got to a point, I would say, in a lot of newsrooms where people, you know, just from working with them more, you get to see them kind of applying your lessons to you. So I would start to get a lot of reporters who would just come to me with ideas, which was great. I didn't have to like flag them down for anything. They were starting to build those sort of like instincts themselves. This kind of ties back to what I said earlier, but just the ability to adapt and respond to a rapid fire news cycle. So for me, this was like Politico really put this to the test for me with everything that happened. But ultimately what I mean is that, I think everyone is going to get stressed or burned out at some point, but I think it's more so about maintaining this calm under pressure, to just kind of like, you know, weather the storm, keep it, you know, and keep everything together and then not allow it to overwhelm you. So again, I think that just comes with really good self-care and learning how to unplug and yeah, turning off when you need to. Let me quickly go through the rest because I put a lot on here. A readiness to learn new programs. Again, just being familiar with tools and excited to learn about them. And there are a lot of different digital tools that we use. And then, yeah, just an eagerness to wear many hats because you never know what each day could take you to. You could be writing one day and then having to like go out and shoot the next day. And then the last one on here was sharp digital instincts. So a lot of you already have this naturally. And we do it all the time. It's really just more so about how you apply that to readers. Again, like what I mentioned with Politico when I started there, I was like, what's a better way we can be like dissecting these stories to an Instagram audience or to a Twitter audience. So I really just used to sit and think about how I would want somebody to explain something to me. What sort of visuals would I need to help me? Because I'm a visual learner. But also the sort of text and the sort of language that we use every day that just feels more comfortable and common sense to a social media audience. So these are instincts like we already have this in us. It's just kind of like realizing, you know, how we can apply that outside of our own lives. Okay, all the different things you can be, and I still didn't list them all, but like I said, social media producer is kind of like the number one thing that comes to mind when people think of like, what is a digital journalist? Does it just mean they're posting on social? Yes, it can mean that, but it can also just mean you're handling homepages. You're the one controlling and steering what sort of stories get prioritized on homepages. You could also just be a reporter, a digital reporter. I have friends who write specifically like just for digital, like actually Kamiko, who Nikki and I worked with. She worked for Digiday now. She's a marketing reporter, so she's publishing stories online every week. You could be a video producer or an editor, a photographer, again, designers, art directors, there's web developers, graphics reporters, coders. I could have kept going. I should have kept going actually. But like, I honestly, if there's something you have an interest in, I honestly can't see how it wouldn't be able to fit into digital journalism in some way. Again, a lot of people are newsletter producers. I do a little bit of that. You have people that run the whole thing, which is like a director of audience or someone who's over the complete, like a senior digital media editor or something. Audio editors for people who work on podcasts. You could also just be like a personality. You could be someone who is speaking on it or hosting your own podcast or you're hosting your own video series. So there's so many jobs. It's actually really great to see how many have opened up since like I first started, because there used to just be one or two things of like web producer or social media producer, but now really most jobs have been I would say, have evolved to be more focused on digital instincts and digital skills, because that's where we're headed. We know that one day a lot of print newspapers won't be here anymore, or there will only just be Sunday print papers, for all we know. So that future seems inevitable, but there's been so many roles that show that, you know, digital journalism is still needed, and there's always going to be a place for that. Let's see. I wanted to jump into, I feel like, oh man, I am like rambling because it's already, the hour's already almost up. I wanted to share some of my favorite people working in journalism, in digital journalism specifically. So these are some names and faces you might be somewhat familiar with or recognize. One person, I'll just quickly go through them. Chelsea Caruso is a reporter here in DC. She actually joined the Axios DC team, so she writes the newsletter there. What I love about her, and she kind of really helped me when I was looking at transitioning from Politico, was that she's a great freelancing writing expert. And I'll make sure I link this in the presentation. But she has a really great guide to freelancing. If you've ever thought about just like pursuing writing and you want to write for different publications, she has a whole guide for that. There's also some really great resources on how to pitch to different publications, some of your favorites, whether it's like GQ or Vogue magazine or the Washington Post. There's a contact list for all of that too. So it's a really great resource. Polly is a photographer, and she also founded this group called Black Women Photographers. So if you're into that, she has a whole platform full of resources that help Black women photographers get jobs, get hired. And then there's Taylor Lorenz, who is a New York Times reporter. She's very big there now, one of their biggest names, and she covers tech culture and trends. She reports on a lot of TikTokers. She did a really great one about the Atlanta Hype House, TikTok Hype House, which is, if you haven't heard about it, you should check out the documentary on Hulu on the New York Times documentary series. There's a really great episode just about that. Travis Lyles is an Instagram editor here at the Washington Post. And he really had a huge vision for like the Washington Post being more active on Instagram. And so, you know, he talked to the right people, he put some pitch decks together, presentations, all that. And just this year, he was able to hire a full team of Instagram producers. And so now that's become a full-time job for him, just from something he was super passionate about. Adriana Lacey is a freelance audience specialist. She has also worked at like the LA Times and Axios, but now she's a great consultant. She's also super passionate about just helping aspiring journalists get the resources and tools they need to make it in the industry. So she has a mentorship program and an internships, like I think it's a Twitter account where she basically reposts a bunch of journalism internships. Bobby Blanchard is really great too. He's also director of audience at Texas Tribune and has done some really great presentations on digital audience. Kamiko McCoy, who I mentioned a moment ago, is a Digiday marketing reporter and also an audience expert. And then lastly, Mandy Hoffmakel. I don't know how to say her last name, but she is a managing editor of audience at Hearst. And she also has a really great newsletter. I got my job at the Washington Post because of her, because of a great newsletter she pulls together with all of the latest journalism jobs across the country. So she compiles this list and sends it out every Monday. And it also has other great resources such as like internships, fellowships, scholarships, and just good guides too, like freelancing guides, all of that. So highly recommend subscribing to her newsletter. And then how to get started. I wanted to quickly kind of walk through some of my like big tips. Number one, I'm all about like building your brand and networking. And because as we all know, employers have been, hang on one second. Employers have long been checking like social media platforms of their job candidates. And so you kind of want to make sure your actual social media channel looks the part, to be honest, which is like, it's kind of sad. And if you really don't feel that comfortable with your employer seeing it, then you want to make sure that your pages are private. But for those of you who want public facing pages and you want to build your brand, you know, Twitter is a great place to start. And it's where Twitter really is a platform for news junkies. And you're going to see a lot of them like Kamiko here, this other woman, Adrian. they market themselves, and they also, make it very clear that they are willing to talk to people, like, DM her, email her, invite her to coffee, those sort of things. Pretty much any journalist I've wanted to connect to, they've always been really open. And I've always found Twitter to be the easiest way to just be like, hey, I had a question about how you got this job, or what you do in your job. They're just so eager to talk, which is like, if you're not, then why are you a journalist, right? If you don't want to meet people. So I would say just put yourself out there and network, and also share your own expertise. And that really helps to build a following too. So yeah, these people are great at that. Create your own opportunities. This just means, like, especially for, your generation, it's so much easier now. Man, I wish I had started blogging or whatever when I was in high school or in college, but there's so many opportunities for you to just start gaining experience now, even without a job. You can shoot events in your neighborhood. You can talk to your own neighbors and people in your community and learn about the stories they have to tell. There's also just so many resources online. If you're trying to learn something, there's free classes. I basically taught myself how to use Photoshop when I got more into like designing, and doing stuff like at the AJC with putting together like social graphics. I never went to school for that or took a class on that. I just would go online and go on YouTube and study these things. But that applies to anything. There's also so many resources for newsletters now, newsletter building. And then even I definitely recommend going to big conferences, and there's a lot of organizations and even just independent journalists who are offering scholarships to help college students in particular go to conferences. My first conference was in college at Savannah State. I went to the Online News Association, and it was because someone paid for me. And that's just awesome. Like, there's so many people who really want to give back, because journalism is a very it is a tough industry in terms of how many challenges we have to face to make sure that we're able to get news across, especially in a time when we're living with like misinformation and trolls and people who try to dismiss our news as fake news or whatever. I think more than ever, we need that transparency, and we need support within the community to just keep us all connected. And then finally, one of my favorite tips, and this has worked for so many people, is just make a portfolio. When I started doing this, it really opened my eyes to how much work I had done over the past, 5 or 6 years in my career. I was like, wow, I've been shooting events, I've been leading classes, making interactives and designing things. This is such a great thing to show prospective employers, is putting together all the work you've done. And that includes things you do in college. So working for your school newspaper or your school television program, you want to showcase all that in a way where people can see just how dynamic and how well-rounded your skills are. So I've talked to people specifically about just building portfolios. I did something with a journalism group called Gather, helping people put their portfolios together. It's just something I'm really passionate about, because it really is hard to show just how much people do in digital journalism. It's not something you can easily put into a resume or a cover letter. Sometimes it needs to be in this visual format that really gives people the breadth and depth of what your talents are. And then just some quick resources here. Journalism Mentors, which I mentioned, is ran by Adriana Lacey, is really great. You literally just click on this link, and there's a whole list of people, journalists who work in different sectors of journalism and different news organizations that are setting up their own office hours, so you can chat with them and pick their brain. And then there's a bunch of news conferences or news organizations that I recommend. NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. There's an Asian American journalist group, a Hispanic group for journalists, and then ONA, which I mentioned before, which was my first journalism conference. These are all great organizations to join. And a lot of companies now will pay for your membership. So my NABJ membership is paid for through the Washington Post. So I never have to pay for it. And then they also pay for me to go to conferences. So that's cool too. A lot of jobs are now offering these perks because everyone's got an issue that they're trying to work on, especially in newsrooms where where there aren't just enough people of color, covering issues in their communities, these sort of organizations really help to sort of bridge that issue and get more people the exposure they need and the opportunities they need. So take advantage of their scholarships, the resources, the free classes they offer. I mentioned Mandy's newsletter already, but there's a link to it. I'm assuming Nikki will send this out or or send you the links.
I will,
and then
always do.
Awesome. Pointer does really great trainings and workshops. I've done a couple of them myself, and so have some of my friends, and it's always just a transformative experience. They do a lot that are online, that are free. Some of them cost a little bit of money, and then some of them they offer, scholarships for. And then on Slack, if you guys are using that at all, or I'm sure you've heard of it if you haven't, but there's so many Slack channels that have nothing to do with like your job. They're not job Slack channels, but they're just Slack channels for communities, for different groups of people. And so I'm in one that's called Journalists of Color. And it's really great to be able to talk to different reporters, editors in there, learn about opportunities, and also just hear about their experiences in the newsrooms. And then Audience Engagement Pros. This is a Facebook group that's really great to join. And it's just so much great information about like different things happening on social media, what people are trying. Just really, it's so hard to stay on top of like all these changes that Facebook and Instagram make. So this is one of those good channels to be in if you're like, if you want to know about the latest tools. Same with creators on Instagram, which is another like here's the latest features we're rolling out on Instagram and how you can use them. And then finally, are we going to make it? Okay, because I want to make sure I have time for questions. Some key takeaways and lessons I've learned. I'm going to fly through this. Number one is that no amount of experience is ever a waste of time, whether that's an internship or you're working at your school's TV station or radio station. Like you can apply everything you've learned to your next job. And there's also so many ways you can take that experience and market it to your advantage. And then number two, audience engagement is everyone's job. I think this is so important to know, and especially when you get your first job in a newsroom, because it's it was very common for me at one point in my career to get a lot of pushback from reporters, especially as Twitter and Facebook were taking off. A lot of reporters didn't understand, like, what do I have to do? Like, I'm just a reporter, or I just write and publish a story. But really, it's everyone's responsibility. It's part of the process in disseminating news. And so they need to play a role in that. And so don't ever let anyone make you feel like if Twitter, if our social media numbers are down, it's because of you. No, it's a team effort. Everyone has to get involved in some way. Something I've reiterated throughout this conversation is to unplug often. What I like to tell people is part of what it means to do your job well means to unplug, to take time away from the computer, and come back feeling refreshed and ready to get back to work. But make sure you take time for yourself. I love this tip from Bobby Blanchard, who I linked to before, which is get a hobby. Hobbies really inform the work you do. They have nothing to do with journalism, but they make you a better journalist. And then embrace the different directions that audience engagement can take you. I've talked to a lot of people who feel like they get pigeonholed in audience engagement, just because maybe, it's so much time spent just sending out tweets and Facebook posts that you kind of lose sense or lose sight of what it is that you really want to do in journalism. But the great thing about working in audience engagement is that you're actually getting so much exposure to other skill sets. I mean, being a social media producer means that you're a writer. It means that you're an editor. It means that you're a designer. It means that you can work with teams and collaborate, help other reporters get their news across. So like you actually have more skill sets than you realize that you can apply to other jobs that you want to pursue in the future. So don't ever feel like if you start in social media, like that's the only thing you can do. And I feel like Nikki and I have both witnessed this with a lot of our colleagues at the AJC. Like so many of them have gone on, like Kamiko, to do reporting, Fizza. Like we have so many friends now who started in engagement and are now like, leading newsrooms and writing stories regularly. So you can go in so many different directions just from audience engagement. And then lastly, talk to your friends and other journalists about pay. This is a huge one that I think the pay transparency movement is only going to continue to grow. It's actually why I'm writing a story about it myself. But There's all kinds of like resources you can find online, like anonymous Google documents and that sort of thing, where people share their salaries and what role they're in and how much they make in that role. But you can also have these conversations with other colleagues in your, they may not, if you don't feel comfortable talking about it with the people in your newsroom, you can talk to, just another journalist, who maybe works for a different company, but do your research for sure. And even if you're young and you're just starting out, don't feel like you have to settle for the number that you're given and that you should just be grateful because you got a job. There's a reason why you've been brought to the table, and you have a lot of value and expertise that people want. So just remember that it's hard to do. I feel like I lowball myself in so many times before I got to this point. So it's easy to say but hard to do. But I do just hope that that there's so many resources and there's people available who will talk to you about these things and be very open about it. And I actually made sure to include my email and social media handles here too, if you ever want to pick my brain. I'm happy to talk about it as well. But that's it. I'm so sorry I rambled so much because I know you have to go soon, Nikki.
No, that's all right. I want to make sure that everyone has time for questions as well. I know Timmy had one as well. You did a wonderful job. Thank you for sharing, Janay. And I really appreciate your transparency, your depth of knowledge, your willingness to share your experience. So thank you for all of that. And I actually learned some personal things about you, like you're born in Germany. Yeah, I'm just going to run a little bit late to the other meeting because I want to ensure everyone has opportunity to ask questions. What questions do you have? I saw Timmy had one.
Yeah, so thank you again for coming to our class and speaking. Your presentation was wonderful, and I just loved how you're confident in everything that you said. But I was just really wondering on how you take care of your mental.
I love that. I think you said mental health, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
kind of went out. I
Oh,
was just kind of wondering if what you did to kind of like unplug, like you had said, because I know you're working constantly with other people, so that's other people's energy you have to deal with. You have to deal with your bosses, and then you have to also deal with this incoming news in front of a screen. So I know like